What does the best 17 look like for the Bulldogs this year? The zero tackle team here, they've made their call and we're going to break it down for you in this video. But before we do that, jump into the comments, let us know what you think the best 17 looks like, and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. We've got plenty of NRL content coming out for you this year. So with all that being said, best 17, let's go. Before we get into it, don't forget zerotackle.com is the #1 independent destination for all your NRL news, player movement, and now games. Check out our latest game, NRL Streaker. Test out your footy stats knowledge, challenge your mates, and see if you can get your name on the leaderboard. All right, and here to break down the best 17 for the Bulldogs this year, Zero Tackle analyst Darren Parkin. Darren, welcome. So the Bulldogs returned to finals for the first time in 8 seasons last year, and that was pretty much on the back of a complete list overhaul over the past few seasons.
Yeah, they were a great side to watch. They were probably the most improved team in the competition, and as you say, huge overhaul of their list. They spent a lot of time in the doldrums, sort of bottom 4 for a couple of years there, and they've been turning that over frequently, but still haven't stopped. They obviously jumped up to 7th. They would have been annoyed to get knocked out in the opening week of the finals, but 10 players departing from their top 30 from the start of last year, and then obviously bringing in another 4 or so, some other promotions handed out within their squad as well, continuing to push for youth, but so far it's worked. They obviously bounced into the finals, and if they get a bit of improvement from more of those kids, then they should be able to stay there.
Yep. All right, so let's look at the best 17 as rated by Zero Tackle, and we'll start with the backs. So starting with the #1, Connor Tracy at fullback.
Yeah, 12 months ago, they were probably unsure how they were going to go in this role, but that's certainly not the case now. Clearly won the race ahead of a couple of others throughout the campaign, finished the year there, and obviously will start the new one at the back as well. He can play effectively anywhere in the defensive unit for them, but he certainly has the talent to make things work. He was a big factor in what they were doing in 2024, and he'll kick things off this year.
Yep. Absolutely. And then we've named our 2 wingers. So Marcelo Montoya, but then also Jacob Carraz.
Yeah, Jacob Carraz was an amazing find, really, the Lebanese international. He was 4th in the competition for total runs, 2nd for running metres as well, scored quite heavily, and was a real asset in their improvement to become one of the league's probably most important players as well. So, and I think he was a weapon that sort of sparked their run to the finals. Marcelo Montoya slotted into the Josh Addo-Carr vacancy. Blake Wilson's a guy who we'll probably mention a few times in reserves roles. He'll be pushing hard for a spot here also, and I expect he'll play a bit of football through the early part of the year.
Yep. And then the centres, so we're going Bronson Cherry and Stephen Crichton.
Yeah, Bronson Cherry had a long time out of the game, of course, for the band. He was 4 years, but came back and performed really well last season. And Steve Crichton kind of went there to do a job, almost became an accidental centre, and then became captain of the year, playing in that role. So, he's found a home that will be his for the foreseeable future.
Yep. And rounding it off with the halves, so Matt Burton, Toby Sexton, added a real spark for them last year.
Yeah, Matt Burton can make some mistakes, but he is a damaging player for them. He just obviously needs to keep developing his game. A few of the numbers on him: 2nd for line break involvements, 4th for kick meters over the season. So there's some of the positives in what he does, and Toby adds a lot of spark for them through the middle, and that was part of why their ball movement transformed so much.
All right, so the 2 props, we have Max King and Sam Hughes, and then in that lock position, Kurt Mann. Let's start with Max King there.
Yeah, all pretty stable. I think that they've all done a good job. I think when they're putting the magnets around and setting up their side, those 3 roles are basically locked away. They have recruited some depth in that space, but I think that will be depth. We'll discuss that a little bit later when we get to the bench. I think there'll be little movement, barring injury, in the middle forward roles this season.
Yeah. And then in the #9, we have Reid Marnie.
Yeah, obviously, no doubt he'll play that role. He obviously went to another level as a player, pushed himself right up into State of Origin calculations, laid more than 100 more tackles than any other player in the competition, 1,240 over the course of the season, and was a major star for them. So, he is a lock, so to speak, within that lineup, and a really important part of their push.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then we'll finish off with the second rollers, so Cacao and Jacob Peterson.
Yeah, Cacao, interesting. A Panthers premiership winner who takes the top mantle here. It becomes a bit of an intriguing question for them, given some of their off-season signings. Tupounua from the Roosters likely behind that starting pair. And then obviously Jacob Peterson, who's a youngster who's doing everything right in the early part of his career. So I think that's how they'll start, but there is some options in that place.
And making up that interchange, we have Bailey Hayward, Josh Curran, Tupanua, and Tom Amorne. So where do you want to start with the...
Yeah, well, Tom Amorne brought in depth in that second row role. He'll probably play some football early in the season, having come across him, and it is an area of strength. Tupanua, who we mentioned, I think will play. He was obviously highlighted a little bit, and I think Curran will get a lot of action in the early part of the year. So there's some good depth there and all fairly versatile. But yeah, we've got them in positions 14 through 17 on the bench to have an influence in the early part of the season.
All right, so that's a pretty good looking best 17 as it stands. So I guess the question is whether they can make progress based on what they achieved last year. Can they unearth a few more young gems? And is there anybody that hasn't been named yet in that's outside of that squad or just fallen outside of that squad?
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Sutton's a player with a stack of experience, the Wigan recruit from many years ago, played a lot of football with Canberra, has only played 13 games in a couple of seasons with the Canterbury Bulldogs as a result of some injury niggles over the journey. So he's a guy that if it all gets right for him, even at this stage of his career, could have an influence. And yeah, for them, it's that they're making the right progress. They're seemingly making the right list decisions by constantly turning it over and bringing in youth and building a decent core and putting some versatile players in there. But yeah, I think for them, it's a case now of consolidating. They're back in the finals for the first time in nearly a decade. And I think they've got the squad to, hover around the mark. Maybe not explode up into the top four, but certainly contest for finals again.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. I think their depth could be tested if, injuries are going to happen. Injuries happen every year. And then obviously, what happens around Origin time. So that is the best 17 for the Canterbury Bulldogs. That's our best 17. Let us know in the comment what you think. Have we named the right squad? It's always a nice contentious time in the comments in our YouTube channel. So subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. We've got plenty of NRL content coming out this year. Thank you, Darren. And catch all the latest NRL news at zerotackle.com.